August. Also a reminder for those of you following the Highest Yoga Tantra, all the old videos are open and those will be open for about the next 5 weeks. So if you missed something or if you want to watch it again, please do. Then I believe like the Labor weekend, this will also be off, but then the following weekend, we've invited Geshe Sonam. And so Geshe Sonam has kindly agreed to give some teachings over Zoom to our community on the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. Is it the last chapter, Dave, or the
No.
concentration chapter? Which chapter is it?
Concentration.
Concentration. Okay,
Yeah,
so it'll be teachings on the concentration chapter. And this is actually really nice because this will kind of give you a taster of the later chapters in that text. And then Geshe-la will start where he left off, sort of more towards the beginning of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara the following week. And also that week, and also in that month of September, we will begin the series on the Vajrabhairava Tantra with some Vajrayogini completion stage. So there'll be like a short break, kind of just that Labor Day weekend, but otherwise we'll have consistent programming. And I believe Geshe Sonam he'll usually do 2 days of teachings, maybe 4 sessions or maybe 3 sessions. So that's something to look forward coming up. And Dave, do you want to say anything about your book group? Is that starting up in the fall as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been missing our weekly get together, little community and the material. So yeah, we'll be starting up again.
Yeah, great. So look out for the if you're on our newsletter, look out for the announcements for Dave's book group. And also like we'll start with the pujas again as well. So Dave usually leads the Tata practice. I lead the medicine Buddha, and yeah, so all of that will be listed. So I see we are now 2 minutes to 10. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable, and we'll get started in 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah. So not sure if it's a hot day where you are. Is it a hot day in New York City, Annie? Yeah. Dave was kind enough to he got a portable AC unit working in this room, so hopefully Kedrup won't be mopping his brow every 5 minutes.
That's very nice.
Yeah, so I want to thank Dave, and yeah. I don't do very well with humidity. So okay. So can everyone hear my voice? Can you hear Geshe?
Yep.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, 다 강가다시 될래도 다로로 소소 다 보게 샤와 야가 강가 야본로 시에라 같이 모였어.
So Geshe greets you Tashidele to all of the Dharma friends, and he hopes that everything, especially all of your wholesome positive activities, are going well.
당아로서 다다디기 다니 샤와데 이나요다. 아니 드니 가르세카르. 아니 가워제게야 다 샤와
So, of course, when we are engaging in these wholesome or positive activities, having the knowledge that they are something positive, then we want to be able to engage with them with a joyful mind.
다 제체 뭐뭐요 다 제체 뭐뭐래서 다 리치 리라워스 제체 카레스 시오질레스
Yeah, there's a cute little bird outside the window listening to Geshe-la's teaching. So he's just noticing the bird and it's calling to us. It's calling to us. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's flown away now. Okay.
다 제체 가디나 되게 등아주 안에 개월 접이갈 소소 놀이나래 단 딘드리게 내가 제비갈라 가 추야게 다 가기 위 제체 쪼지데 나로스 강이 다 등어게 저 뭐게와 대파
So when we engage with these virtuous activities and when we do this with knowledge, then we can bring forth, we know that we have reasons to be joyful. This will help us to engage fully with what is wholesome. And then correspondingly also, this will help us to diminish our unwholesome, our non-virtuous karma. And we understand this, right, because fundamentally the happiness that we are seeking, these virtuous things that we do, they are good causes for that. So based upon this understanding, then it's very important for us as we engage in the practice that as much as possible, we try to maintain a joyful mind, a joyful attitude while doing so. And beyond that, right, beyond the causes of happiness, if we think the activities that we're engaged in this context, these lead us to liberation. These lead us to achieving bodhicitta. These lead us to complete Buddhahood, full enlightenment. Then there is even more and more reason to be joyful. So you should think, myself and others, I am going and I am leading them to a happiness, a state of happiness that is completely untouched, completely beyond suffering. So Shantideva in his Bodhisattva Charyavatara, he says that if you want to be happy, then what you need to do in the context of practice is, without allowing it to be lost, to maintain this joyful mind. Because the danger is, right, if we don't put some effort into maintaining that joyful attitude, that joyful attitude can be lost. And the result of that can be that one becomes unhappy in one's practice. And similarly, we understand that unhappiness, an unhappy attitude, a dissatisfied attitude, this is really the door to the arising of anger. And so if we're in a state of unhappiness, it's going to be a lot easier to get annoyed and angry, and correspondingly to fall into all of the problems that entails.
다 컨트롤에 사서 갖고 하기 위해서는 걸리라고 말어.
And we also know that after the anger has already arisen, to think, okay, now I'm going to stop the anger, that's like hard to do, isn't it?
다 등한서 간게 건용용 친구야. 대신 뭐 시에 그 말어.
Yeah. So we all have a lot of experience with that anger rising and how that works. So no need to explain further, really.
렐레 간이 컨트롤 코로프에 용사 거대 과토스나. 근데 그 딘디우 간게 과토를 알아.
So if while we're relaxed, we work on eliminating the basis or the door for the arising of anger, right? This is the strategy, and then we will fall into less difficulties and fall from that. So there is a verse in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which is like, it's something like, whatever the circumstances are, may I be ever joyful, something like that. So this means that, right, maintaining that and not losing it. So there's lots of reasons to maintain a joyful mind. Right, right. So then His Holiness the Dalai Lama has also stated that the Buddha Dharma's purpose is for us to be able to arise a courageous attitude, right? It is for us to be able to bring forth a powerful minds and so forth, right? There are difficult points that are expressed within the Dharma, but those are in context, and they are not for the purpose of like discouraging us or putting ourselves down. So when we speak about the Buddha Dharma, of course, there are many dharmas within the Buddha's teachings, and we have to understand which of those are the branches of the tree and which of those are the roots or the main points. And the root of the Dharma is those teachings, those practices which lead to liberation. So we speak about Dharma of liberation, the teachings of liberation. This is the main reason that teachings or Dharma are needed, right? To be able to work to liberation. So we should also understand that when we speak about refuge, we speak about the three jewels of refuge, but there is only one actual refuge, right? We have the teacher, the propounder, who is the Buddha, and we have those friends who help us along the path, which is the Sangha, but the actual refuge is the Dharma, is the teachings themselves. So if we think about it from this perspective, we'll see many reasons to bring forth a joyful mind and also many reasons to be able to maintain that joyful mind. And also to understand that the fundamental mind, right? It is like pure, clear water without any pollution or particles. So what happens is if we are able to maintain a joyful mind, then this fundamental nature of the mind can remain clear and pure. But on the other hand, if we have unhappy minds, various projections, unpleasant feelings, and so forth that are arising, these are like factors that are going to obscure the clarity of the water, and there's work to do.
was.
So water that is like turbid or unclean, right? It didn't start that way, right? It started as clear, clean water, but because of various factors being mixed with it, right, it became unclean. It became turbid. So we also should understand, though, that even if the water is like unclear, is unclean or turbid, that lack of clarity, that turbidity is not the nature of the water, right? We understand that the fundamental nature of the water is something that is clear and transparent. And so what we have to do then, if we understand that this is not the true nature of the water, that this is not the true nature of the mind, is we have to clear away those particles that are obscuring the clarity. And so to kind of clear away the muddiness or the turbidity of the water, then we are going to do a meditation just based upon first recognizing and tapping into that fundamental nature of the mind. So just take a moment to place the body and the mind in a state of relaxation. So think I am going to bring the four elements into balance. I'm going to bring forth a relaxed state. In order to be able to recognize and tap into this fundamental nature of the mind, whatever thoughts or regrets about the past, let me set those aside. So think that so allow whatever waves of those distractions just to subside naturally and to restore the stillness of the ocean of the mind. And whatever thoughts, hopes, or worries we have about the future, just think that these are like clouds in the sky. With a gentle breeze, they float away. We don't hold them. So think that in this way, we have been able to settle any dust, any disturbance within the mind, and we have brought it to a point of clarity. Like a mirror, it can reflect any object. It is clear and luminous. It is clear and it is luminous like the moon. It can illuminate away any ignorance, any lack of knowledge.
se shwa lele chini tel page ngoshipa atel tani debi kala ta yela dewa do gawa cher ndo da ta kazu to.
So when the mind is still and relaxed like this, and we are able to recognize this fundamental nature, we can then bring forth a real happiness and joy.
Tendri melo dong jai se zuma ya bote kaze tata chino chen nile shia page shira ya pa to be so.
So based upon this clear nature of the unobscured mind and its vastness, I will tap into this to bring forth a reality of the ultimate mode of abiding, the way things really are, a wisdom that understands that.
Mariba Rabani is it Rumbajeta Mariba Tawa Tatuba. No, Muzuta Melazo, so Tindishul touch so much.
I'll tap into this to bring the mind into the direction of slowly clearing away ignorance, starting with the coarser expressions of ignorance down to the more subtle, until even the most minute, final aspects of ignorance are completely cleared away.
Lama you do some Jesus Gangalata, the dish so much you watch so what teaches the Tagayo so much.
In order to be able to do this, I will make prayers and requests to the gurus, yidams, Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and all the enlightening beings. So we'll begin with the recitation. Tumba chom de jin she ba dra chom ba yon da ba zo be song ge re ba dang shab su dem ba de wa she ba Jeden gemba gebuduwe kalo gyurwa lana meba ladam minangi temba songye chomdende pejawa shagyatubala chaselo chede kyabsu jiho Temba chondende dijin sheba drachomba yang daba zobe sangye sheba dang shazu demba dewa sheba jiden chemba chebu dewe kalo jurwa lana meba ladang minamgi temba sangye chomdende pejawa shakya tubala chazelo chede kyabsu chiho Temba chomdende dijin sheba drachomba yang daba zobe sangye sheba dang shabsu demba dewa sheba jiden chemba chebu dewe kalo jorwa lana meba ladang minamgi temba sangye chomdende pejawa shakya tubala chazelo Cheda Gyatso Chi Ho. We'll do a short mandala. So ji peki chochi meto cha rila linji nide gyamba de sangi jindo mide buwagi drogo nanda jina cheba sho idam guru ratna mendala kanirya yami. Refuge in bodhicitta. Chedang sogi chenam lai changchu bardu dani gyatso chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam ge jola benjir sange jobar sho. Chedang sogi chenam lai changchu bardu dani gyatso chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam ge jola benjir sange jobar sho. Chedang sogi chenam lai changchu bardu dani gyatso chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam ge jola benjir sange jobar sho.
오야 다 도단이 그 샤와니 오다 동네 샤와 끊어 담에 샤와 ngwa 다 되지 가서 더 같이 버렸어.
So, of course, as much as possible, keep in mind, very important, the activities at the beginning and the activities at the end. In the beginning, the motivation, and at the end, the dedication.
오다 나로서 다 노아 메시아들 다 레와 피타 버지야 이자 던지가 다 버게 야 동네 샤와 담에 샤와 강가 소로 또야 거가 첨버지야 레스.
So we say that amongst the migrators, amongst sentient beings, human beings have the qualities of this human brain, this affective mind. And so then as much as possible, we want to use that and use the capacity for thinking. For example, by keeping in mind the motivation in the beginning and the dedication at the end.
오다 노아 젠다 이는 다 가서 뭐 가서 지세나요 다 거기와 돼야지도 요 때는 이나요 담에 샤와 돈단이 다 투메 샤와 던지 손으로 또야 돼 매이자 여와데 템보서야 다 거가 다 템보레스.
So of course we say that all sentient beings generally have the opportunity, can bring forth virtuous minds, right? But because many sentient beings lack like the sophisticated power of thought, then to be able to sort of think and hold in the mind the motivation from the beginning and hold the dedication at the end, they are not able to do that, not able to maximize the opportunity of stable merit.
다 벨이나 다 뭐뭐 너무 야포든지 이나 다 가서 더 다니 라도 다니 바주도 되르지 다도 든지 꼬라트야고 다 로지 단달이나 뭐야 해서.
But we want to help those sentient beings with the opportunity to make merit. So this is why influential families in Tibet, for example, they would often have a custom of having like goats or cows or yaks and so forth, that they would or the family dog that they would lead around the stupas and so forth as a means of helping them accumulate merit.
다 개와서 아드사기 야르테는 단달라바 노지레 다 걸레바 코로 다 시지가 다 도메샤와세 아드 담메샤와세 아드 고테 고가디야 말이스.
And of course that that helps them to accumulate virtue, but because as we mentioned, those creatures, they don't really have the same brain power, the same mental capacity. The merits they accumulate are limited because they're not able to put thought into things like the activities at the beginning and the end.
어다 나링간조 누무이나 바주테르지 아마테지 패션보체는 할레야 다 मनोजिके चमोशे
rangi amae
nganzo ameta amaore ta amepija amaji.
right. So but that doesn't mean that these creatures don't respond to kindness. The sister of Geshe-la's mother, for example, she takes a lot of time to kind of interact and speak to the cows and so forth, and it's very clear that they respond, right? And Geshe-la's uncle jokes that she likes talking to the cows because they don't talk back to her. They're not going to question her. But really, on the basis of kind of that attitude of friendliness, she speaks to them with kind of like the same regard that she would speak to a human being, right? And they do respond to that. And we see also, right, with people's pets, if they keep a cat or a dog, if they're affectionate, if they show loving concern towards that pet, then this is something that is often reciprocated. Ale, los. And so there was a Lama from Drepung who there was quite a fierce bull that was living in that vicinity. But then from speaking to the bull in a very nice way with affection, it really responded.
So why is
Geshe mentioning these instances here? This relates to a principle and to a verse from the Madhyamakavatara, the entering the middle way, that he thought of glossing today. So in terms of experiencing happiness, then if we look at different types of creatures, there's dogs and cats that live in very good situations, and they might have more stability and happiness than some human beings. Yeah, loso. So then, but the problem is, of course, if the owner of the dog or the cat is not creating those opportunities, like were mentioned before, for them to create virtue, then actually by them enjoying this good situation, what happens is that the potential of their virtuous karma becomes more and more diminished, right? It's like putting money in the bank. If we just kind of use what is there without replacing it, not only will we not accumulate interest, the money will go down and down. So this is part of why prayers are important, right? Like when we experience moments of happiness, we realize, right, that these are the results of accumulated merits. Those are merits, those are wholesome things that are coming to fruition. But we don't have to worry that those will be exhausted if we are continually engaging in the practices of accumulating merit and dedication, because the money that is going out, right, or the positive potential that is going out, we are replacing that. So Geshe is wait, I think you can probably hear Geshe's voice. It kind of goes a little bit more musical. So he's quoting a very long verse, and I said I didn't get that verse before. So and he said he's given it to me, but so apparently I should know it by now. It's about the benefits of these practices. Yeah, so he'll give me this verse later, and we will give it to you next time. So with this human mind, while we have the opportunity of this human mind and intelligence, it's important to kind of establish a vast motivation, important to accumulate the merits, and important to dedicate them correctly while we have this opportunity. So we'll just take a moment as a preliminary to sort of set that motivation. So think that we are going to purify the mind, to purify the winds or the prana, and in this way settle into a state of calm.
도로 소싱인 리세쇼와 헬레 데바이나 초메비 초와 노도 강가 자야와 누지 바르 바제도 야도요 소마치
가레자라고 그래.
잔누지 바야도요
가레.
한 초메비 초와도 노도
So as we settle the body and the mind into a state of stillness, imagine that like a rainbow fading into the sky, the discursive or distracting thoughts slowly diminish.
테네 우실 판도게 갈 때네 류 초나 바다 우 시템베 갈다 류조마 예지간 같이 지가지로 소
And as you exhale, as you breathe out, imagine that all of the stale air and energy is being cleared out of the body. And as you breathe in, imagine that fresh air and new energy are coming in.
테 코로고 뭐 좀마 다라 로이야 보트가 로다 템보야고요 소바도
In this way, we tap into the fundamental nature of the mind, which is something that is clear, which is something that is solid, something beneficial.
세디딘데 다 사회 버스 추바다 이제 버스 추바야 보지 다 사다요 소바도
And so now our task is within this ground of the mind that is now prepared, is to plant seeds for what is positive, for what is wholesome, perfect seeds within it.
용게 천디가 예 아니 뭐 시바 다 생제 간리질 다가 이나 다 로로 소소가 예자 시수시마도 다 니네서 다 녀자 시게 다지 좀에 소바도
So let us think about all sentient beings, not only the ones who are close to us, but also strangers, understanding that in fact we are connected, we are close to every single sentient being. There is not a single one that we could point to and say that they are an enemy, that they should be disregarded. We are connected to every sentient being.
여메 봐 요조 다 누가 제도 집안을 찾거든 여메 봐 요조 다 니가게 되시 다 저게 되시 다 누가 땡등에 비다 내가 버스 줘봐도 내 그게도 선물을
And so because we are connected to everyone without exception, then without exception, we must lead every being away from suffering and the causes of suffering. We must lead every being to both temporary and ultimate happiness. We must lead every being to the final state of happiness that is completely beyond suffering.
근데 그다 내서 여보들 내가 시야를 좋은게 내가 소소로요 물리 여본들이 지요 손지기 친들이 자신 보지도 제대요 예의자 대답이 제대다 손지 상티 더 봐서 이 소마전 손지 세가스도
I can definitely actualize this. Why is this the case? Because I have achieved this human rebirth with all of the freedoms and richnesses. I have met that which is hard to meet, the Buddha Dharma. I have all of the conditions necessary to be able to work towards reaching the state of enlightenment and leading every last being to that state. Bring forth the mind of bodhicitta.
如所说以那的现在西都也得是啊，容易去折没，连把折没啊，你猜，他点点什么东西，他这头个人什么去？
Because both the faults within the mind as well as the positive mental qualities, neither of these are inherently existent. Neither of these exist from their own side. It is definitely possible to change the mind and reach this goal.
等这上班了，等的小娃出面的时候，比比来蒙不几怕，超把小娃东西嘛，他心里人理，俺那用完的他，才小娃超送上班的，
Kare, chaba badi chaba me bachai thi, chua.
超把嘛心中个是吧？
Yeah. So then in this way, imagine that through bringing forth this powerful positive mind, all the negative karma accumulated, it is like ice that is melted away easily with a warm rain.
我也了解，
So we'll pause there.
你什么点呗？李松，
Ojis.
我呀，他俺说弟弟是做啥的？是跟我都讲个，他你那得了不给啥说嘛，我就这样了，他可我也得人把这东西干啥哇？
So then that will end the preliminaries there and the motivation and sort of that motivation or goal we set to be able to reach that goal that we thought we need to actually cultivate in stages.
我当老张努力的呀嘞，说他老张个伊那他来东北干了没得可能要求的是哇？他伊那人罗的，他人把这东西干啥哇？
So it's a little bit like going to school, right? When students start attending school, they have like a big goal or a dream that they're aiming towards, but they understand that over a long period of time, that's something that they'll work towards in steps.
当你那做那些那个，他俺做的没车了伊那样，给我说要的得了给我，你那样嘛，是可是他主要么就说了对样的哇。
So, in terms of what we can do in life and the kind of happiness that we can unlock, there is no greater happiness than this. What we are working towards is something inexhaustible.
我他这个多了，这个多了，你那是没那俺做开了个样嘛，他的还来个那是是。
And also think about it, it's quite amazing that the teachings here, right, they are all underpinned by reasons, right? There are reasons for things. And if there is something that is given that we cannot sort of identify a reason for, we are not required to accept that.
他听的我去，他都能做，他老热噻，他别搞全部都能那些那现在他搞切出的这个样嘞。
And so if one has a bit of knowledge about practice, then we can see that these texts on the Lam Rim or the stages of the path, in many ways, there is nothing that is more important or precious than this.
他开把修东把扎全部收，他也开始介绍样嘞。 那给了伊那东北的上班都你这都上去晒到，还来个等呢，苏定吉是了说吧，的见到是扎起我说，老的在就是了扎起我说我们对吧？
Ale, los, Lam Rim, sachambo sogimendis.
东北的的见到让我去都全部就了。
Ale, los. So some people are saying that, it's sort of the essence of the Gelug tradition is being lost and that people are very enthusiastic for all of these empowerments and for practicing the three deities of Guhya Samaja, Vajrabhairav, and Chakra Samvara and so forth. And, and then maybe because of this, then things like love, compassion, bodhicitta, and especially this presentation of the Lam Rim, of the graduated path, doesn't get so much emphasis.
他其实现在伊那啥些感觉你嘛伊那他东北的上家全部都做把全部都等你现在了，你那可能是把这东西要再去学习了这个么对是。
Okay, nga da kine komason tanda dene. So karisun so nganso de gelug pa yena dene nganso di ngak donang so tene dene Lam Rim.
全部就了呀，就讲的东北人了。
Right.
人把这都要了学这个么对。
Should argument this. Dene de kaji dani ma cheaper res.
这一般人啥家全部都做把全部都什么等全部就了。
And so it's a similar situation.
这是来了我真的。
So then it's a similar situation in the Kagyu and the Nyingma traditions, right, where there's so much emphasis on Mahamudra and Dzogchen that similarly, right, these preliminary important parts of the path don't receive the attention that they deserve.
다 쿠바도 마스는 시산에 와서 다 땡보요는 더니 그 릴라원도 같이 땡내 용거로 왔어. 다 됐은 거 알았어.
So it's a little bit like constructing a house, right? If we have the foundation and the first parts of the house properly in place, then it's going to be something very solid when we get to the upper floors.
더니 시 땡보면은 쉐마가 쿠만 노지, 짜가 쿠만 노지, 그는 그 릴라원 다시 맨도 왔어.
And we know with a poorly constructed house, especially if the foundation and so forth are not in place, if they're made of mud, then just based upon some circumstances that the house easily falls apart.
다 배가 배침보지를 티노와 만지까지레스 티스를 심보치 사요. 뭐하고 자야지.
Ale,
로사칼 티스는 심보치 사요. 티하고
hakumason, sorry.
알레 다들 저거 된다. 뭐세도 짜침보 차야도 좀 녹아까지레스.
Yeah. So the reason that ale, right, it's something about like the essence of butter is delicious because of the butter itself. So what I'm understanding, it's kind of maybe a little bit like a ghee, a sort of refined butter. So Geshe is saying that ngakti.
뭐 짜침보 차야도 더니 다 배가 비도보 이런 같은 녹아까지레스.
So it's through the kindness of sutra actually that a tantra is so powerful and precious.
다 됐죠. 저한테 민주소주에서 용답에 따와서 다 배가 같이 뒤뒤 알았어.
And of course, the most important thing underpinning that is these three minds of definite emergence, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness.
다 돼서 땡보 용도 마요 다 간주전에 단다까도 로르데 쪼레스.
And so in order to sort of bring those forth, then one of the main ways is through the practice of the Lam Rim teachings.
다 된지서와. 뭐야 다 가도.
So in terms of where we are, for those of you who are following in the text, we are on page 100, and we are in the last paragraph on that page, specifically where it says, it is emphatically stated that since one must achieve freedom from cyclic existence, the mind seeking liberation is extremely important.
뭐야 다 루니 시파 코알레 조이 타바 저 기피 타바 데니글로데 셔도 가치위 탄데 절로데 시 기바 낸지 수라스.
So Geshe, just reading that sentence, for those beings who are unable to meditate on mind generation, which engenders positive mindsets for the sake of all sentient beings, it was emphatically stated that since one must achieve freedom from cyclic existence, the mind seeking liberation is extremely important, and therefore one must generate the mind wishing for liberation.
단데인에서는 간접 비미야 가르세카르. 강가 대실 니네치 대바요 아이자. 니네서는 코테세
So Geshe is saying that actually to bring forth this mind-seeking liberation, he thinks that the reasoning required for this is actually something quite easy. It's not so difficult because it's really just wanting to seek what is a genuine happiness, actually.
다 소식대로 니네 데려와. 누가 때는 maybe 대화치 세요. 되게야 데려왔어.
And so don't you want a happiness that is completely without suffering, right? This is something that we want, right? Something that we want to strive for.
다 된디바지. 아니 유전도 롱지부 코알레 타위 타바 된다니와데 노트 연비 롱이 타바 토나뇨비 로 치므르와 예데데 가체테.
Yeah, so now we come to the next part. In other authoritative treatises, it was taught as a mistake to seek liberation from samsara for oneself alone, and therefore inappropriate to generate a mindset thinking, if only I could attain liberation. Yeah.
통도와 다 유카시가 놀라 다 야체 토월레게 딜라 전지 세미뇰랭 인레게 소소 지우 타발란도야 소 주고 말해 소 니가 말했어.
So what this is saying is that when in certain texts, when you reach sort of a higher level of practice, then it is given that it is like inappropriate to seek just for your liberation alone. So that's where the second part of the sentence comes. And thus there exists instructions on having to remain in cyclic existence for achieving the aims of others. Right. So this is setting the stage for sort of a question that might come about this presentation.
레시 시파 코알라 네기바 돈바 텐다고니 호테 티난 가데 예바타바 노메 호테 카타와 이나 타바 테니글로 유유에요 말에 이니 메지 제데도 테니 더가르세아테 당기 테닝 때에서 가완다 원래
So then we come to the next part. At first glance, these may seem contradictory, but the Bhagavan gave different teachings regarding practices that accord with the stages of progression of the mind of a single being at earlier and later times. So Geshe is just explaining that, we might think, why would I want to bring forth a mind for myself to achieve liberation when it's very clear that one's main kind of focus should be working towards the aim of others.
Ngashi korje tine tenzo nyole shegi ba shida chete gashi lonje zoodong gashi lonje yala ge tsada shine misa ngare mato tsuma nyole shegi ba shi yitsa lora chemor sunba tar yamba ane sato nepi esa temba to nyangame da to bi chewashi yundala tine wongwa su.
So, at first glance, they may seem contradictory, but the Bhagavan gave different teachings regarding practices that accord with stages of progression of the mind of a single being at earlier and later times. Therefore, they must be practiced in successive order. Only with some exceptions can we separate some aspects into the principles of the path and others into branches. From this, we can clearly understand that everything must be practiced, just as stated in the great treatise on the stages of the path. Thus, it is said that the greatness of being able to realize all teachings as non-contradictory comes in dependence on this treatise. So it's said here that actually we don't need to see these as contradictory. What we can see is that they are like the main part of the path as well as its branches. And in fact, that these were taught for guiding sentient beings in stages according to their capacity.
This one, what a late on Bicala Corata, Nipashra, maybe Cala Sodo Chivo, and the Tabatona, the Gere on Batita. So at
the beginning, right, for a beginner, when our sort of faculties are more limited, then as we set out on the path, it is good to bring forth this mind that is striving for liberation for oneself. That is important. But as one progresses and the mind becomes more powerful, then this will be sort of set aside as the main focus, and one will be more focused on accomplishing the welfare of others. There's no question that the Buddha taught and in fact praised achieving the state of liberation or moksha for oneself. And in fact, if we look in the modern day, right, the Theravada tradition, this is still the goal of those practitioners primarily, is individual liberation. So then it's very important for us to understand that this is what is cultivated in the beginning stages. But then as one becomes more and more advanced, then striving for liberation merely for oneself can be set aside, and one can strive for the complete enlightenment for the sake of not only oneself, but also for others. So it's like in school, right? In the beginning, although we have a vast goal, we focus on a more limited scope of study. But as we move up in class and become more and more advanced, then what we are studying becomes vaster and vaster.
This one, Garemato, No, Tindivaci, Dina, Jitendisa, Hakosa Tema Tojangame to Basel Casola, Miss Garemato, Ajaya, Sunji, Yamare, Kashi Mato.
And so another important principle about this point about being non-contradictory is that there are none of the Buddha's teachings, with just a few exceptions, right, that were mentioned. There's nothing in the Buddha's teaching that should be set aside. Actually, we want to try to practice them all together without leaving anything out.
Tina, she would ching it can shipping and so send you dungala, ni tapa and jet tele, tande lo, nietzsche terale, Chulubata, Somba Jilla, Mashi, Kozala, Tosoma, she even Jiki can tembe, Tori Hami Patoja, Deva, only can go Niente, Sepa maybe, Sipa calling, what's a tata, member Luta, Tone.
So we are midway down page 101. A person who has not generated the wish for liberation from the suffering of the three lower realms due to sincere fear, a mindset akin to the disgust a prisoner has toward their prison, which is taught in the context of the person of small scope, is not able to generate the uncontrived attitude of wishing for definite emergence from samsara, taught in the context of the middle scope being, which is seen the nature of samsara as a blazing expanse due to having no desirous craving for the marvels of the higher states of gods and humans.
This way, oh, that they do search me, says Lila Warren was, see what about and so sir, Pagenjipachi Mana, Coashil and Jipasati Koyosakura.
So that nothing so much to explain here. Geshe just saying that, you know, if we don't have sort of a genuine fear for the three lower states of samsara, sometimes called the three lower realms, then it's going to be difficult to have a fear or a dread for samsara, for cyclic existence in general. And you know, when we talk about these three lower realms of hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals, we don't need to think of those things necessarily as something far away. When we look at the state of the world today, so much of the suffering that is experienced is akin to the suffering of those realms. And for example, if we think about the environment in the world, how many problems and sufferings unfold from places being too hot or too cold, for example. And when we speak about the hungry ghosts that are mainly suffering from hunger and thirst, right, we see so much of that in the world. We don't need to think just of that realm. And we ourselves, we see very clearly, right, how much difficulty we have if we are not able to satiate our hunger or relieve our thirst, right? We need food and water. And if we look around the world also, you know, visible to the eye, all of the wars, diseases, famines, and so forth, you know, these are very clear instances of suffering that we ourselves can see. So how this progresses is first, right, like we have this like smaller scope where one is thinking about the suffering of the three lower realms in particular, and this brings forth a wish, right, to take rebirth in the higher realms of the humans and gods, of the humans and celestial beings. So that happens. Then the next thing that happens beyond that is one thinks more about the sufferings of samsara in general, and one wishes to achieve a state beyond samsara. So we can see also that, you know, so many of the problems that we experience within samsara, they happen in relation to this physical body that we inhabit, right? So why is this the case, right? It's the case because this body that we inhabit is in the nature of karma and affliction. Because it was created related to karma and affliction, this means that it is going to experience difficulties.
다 리강가 대니가 다 조야 지메피 리우 요아레 리르 중에로 뭐뭐 요아레 와스 리 레도 냐모고 소자지가 리 레도 냐모고 마조이 리 뭐뭐 이만다와 요아레.
So we can speak about different types of bodies, right? Those categories of bodies that are created mainly due to karma and affliction, as well as those bodies that have causes that are not related to karma and affliction.
어당가조 깨자 무엇이에 차이바 당가조 깨자시에 대하 변화 쇼주지 세도 뚱반이 있어야 돼. 쇼주지 세도 전에 뚱반이 녀서도 또바 레소나. 레도 냐모 기빠테네 매사레스.
So it is said that this is the importance of bodhicitta. When one is able to have a direct realization of emptiness that is moistened by bodhicitta, one is able to reach a state where one no longer has where one no longer has to fear karma and affliction. It doesn't mean that the karma and afflictions are completely eradicated at that point, but it means that they are no longer able to create significant problems. So one doesn't have to pay attention to diminishing them specifically. So then if we think about this, we can see that our way of study, that this is something that is always connected with wisdom.
tumani sa shonju se se ate tndriga ta khonni pachinda sa isa nanzu leka che yares tumani to shonju se shibo she ba so me so tndri ne se ya pochin sa ya isa nanzu tembo chin leka che
so this is the kind of happy result of cultivating these minds of emptiness and bodhicitta, and that is what we are working towards.
ta tndri jiren de sndri songa 오다 코알레 니판 주데 저somba 지마 많이 바다시 다디 송아 대다비 시부 중이 다다
kebu chungu
시부 중이 런제 네데 제벨레 동보와 시라 다다 루리 리라 차파 본리 바드 린드 도자 이세 때나 아니 론 주사 때니 메바다버 제비 아고사라와 달레 동보와 지나 동보니 거의 리 간가 나로스 리데 거의 리레 이지레 니니레선 콜.
So then just reading this first verse, and then I'll give you the gloss from Geshe. So if the doctrine that it is proper to give up attachment to one's body and that the body is something to be discarded is taught to someone who is a beginner and a vessel for the path of persons of small scope, they will find themselves completely ungrounded. So that means that for somebody who's a beginner, if you talk about sort of the negative aspects of the human body and so forth, and sort of emphasize on that could actually make them unhappy. It's something that could hinder the practice.
디체다 먹게 좁은 것을 누워서 램바 소치 로이 네체 저저 아니 체톤조이 가스 밀린데요.
So instead of that, if it is explained to them that our present human body of leisure and fortune is extremely fundamental for achieving the aims of oneself and others, and is a precious opportunity full of potential that should not be wasted, it is much easier for them to take. Based on that, they develop the discernment of their human body having leisure and opportunities as a wish-fulfilling jewel. Aspiring to attain such a body, even in their next life, they practice the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues and so forth, developing the level of their mind in stages.
This one, Talui Nipata let Tombo Tomboachi, Tombo Melissa Chamber, Tanjonia, or Tania Kawa, Tania Nipachewa, or Tateji Kaze, Tadana, and Korongosuel, the Lilagare.
So for the beginner, actually, if we emphasize these positive aspects of a human body, how a precious rebirth with all of the freedoms and richnesses has all of these benefits, and then for somebody who is sort of in the beginning stage, it is going to be easier for them to embark on the path with that mentality.
做记的他的所以呢，但是我们都什么农村这些家呢，可怜了我们啊，一下，么早起么子我们领导了，去了么弄有啊，我他电机的别人呢，我你给点早起么这头吧，我身体这些家呢，谈到有感觉啊。
And also Geshe said, you know, in the contemporary setting, because we're in a secular environment where it might not be so easy for people to accept, for example, past and future lifetimes as a beginner, then we can speak about the human body and the benefits of it by looking at examples in the world, right, of people who bring great benefit to others.
我在听地方去，这什么？他第一切的没给这帮个吃的同送啊。你说两把手机，落一年在日，接到这一干是没领的用，年毛比两万的凶啊。没中啊，你不面去，多下盐比差些像没人，原来这平板的协议这些比他把这个字是干啥
？So just okay, so just start halfway up. They practice the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues and so forth, developing the level of their mind in stages. At a certain point, they are taught that even this human body that arose through the power of afflictions is unclean, has no essence, is to be discarded and not suitable to be attached to, and that one must achieve liberation in which the continuum of rebirth of these appropriated aggregates is severed.
但今天要不西个嘛，我他天没个干了，那年天都等着干了，那别等说没着个那自己用个样嘞。
So we need to explain that di chepa di, right? Yeah, so when it says severed here, Geshe said we have to be very clear on what this means. So what this means is that in the Shravaka practices and the hearers practices and also in the Pratyeka Buddha practices, it is said that konso tarpadi sena chepadi kare.
Yeah, tava kore tama lesona. Then it kanga man and watching this.
So it talks about being severed in that when one reaches liberation, it is like a complete cessation, which means that everything is cut off or stops.
Oh, that nganzo but me ya set over lesona. Koi little man dog matter, lim man dog matter, man dog matter, shiba man dog yama.
But what we would say is that as one progresses in the practice, then the samsaric body and so forth are left behind. But that doesn't mean that there is no longer a continuum of a body, no longer a continuum of a consciousness, or no longer a continuum of a self. These are things that continue.
That's when you don't believe the paper colors when you go in a race. I should just about J. or Teji Kanga, Tamertania, that cross Liar was, but they can get ling in the race. Inayo, Koilimares.
So we, you know, when we look at the scriptures, we talk about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and gathering and doing different sort of activities. So in these situations, they have bodies, right? These Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas have bodies. They are just no longer samsaric bodies.
Oh, that do to us. Oh, that and you is that I'm not that giving in and is.
So on the basis of understanding this, we can understand that what we are aiming towards is a state of real happiness. That's important to understand.
Oh, nearly Pimbon the Shevi Judge of the reason was so see low period to swing. Yeah.
Period
to be Tochi and Yosan Luja Mato, Doja Chijo matches when you kill her. There's good. Gandago, man. Deja Coali in June, what you say to Mapa, Senche Yella maybe, Jim Niji but Tini Bana, Shawa Kalasi.
So continuing on page 102, everything must be practiced in accordance with the stages of development of the individual person. Nothing is to be discarded and there is no contradiction. Likewise, without the slightest experience of disgust for samsara, how is it possible to generate a fully qualified, uncontrived, great compassion observing other sentient beings? Chuatambodi, right?
Oh, that to what Tombo Senata, then the Tashi. Naruso Gaya Shonju Sekuar, Shonju say you want that G, so Nijichambukuyar was.
So all of us want to achieve bodhicitta, right? That is something that we want, but we need to understand that in order to achieve bodhicitta, we need to have a great compassion as the foundation.
Oh, that Nijichambu, Nina Pugapita, but Tembo Yonga, so Koale, Taitani, Ninjugo, Tembochi, the Momana.
So If, however, we want that great compassion to be able to come forth in a solid and stable way, if that does not have sort of as its preliminary, a mind of definite emergence or renunciation that definitely wishes to escape from samsara, then it is not going to be possible to bring forth that great compassion.
다 땡이네 뚜빠시야 세요다 레마도 고자야도 요하러 와 단단히 간도 쇼마 첨부 고추고 요하래 이지 첨부 고야 요하래.
So Geshe said that another really important thing to clarify here is that when we say it won't be possible to bring forth bodhicitta and great compassion and so forth without renunciation, we're talking about realizing great compassion. We're talking about realizing bodhicitta. Of course, if one has not had a realization of renunciation, one can still meditate on love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So just important to clarify that point.
이제 첨부 지라 마셔와 somba shonju chu de se xeba shuju la lo be shonju senba de no ke pe mo shi pi shi ya la ma si be pe do chi chun bi na
Namkagi mepokti daborwa. So likewise, there we go. Without great compassion, a bodhisattva who trains in the conduct of the 6 perfections and the attitude of generating the mind aimed at enlightenment is equivalent to a sky flower, an example of something that does not exist.
ta no ke me do sa do tane ru ra sa de chi no ke da sa de ji kan ga pe mo bo pe che do ya res.
So there's many examples. The sky flower is one, the rabbit's horn is the other. Chuolagi dawa. Yeah, and a moon within water, right? These are all examples of impossibilities, non-existence.
Ta te no ji tane sa ni ji chang ga to ko de so so to ngi ji chen so no ma to na yu sa ko ya ma. Yes.
Right. So then if one doesn't have this idea that I definitely must achieve great compassion, then that is not going to be something that can be realized.
So so to ko yi so nyoda so no to ne de do ta yi me ji ta ma ta wa ta ma de ta go de so ba de la ngin ju.
Yeah. And to bring forth that bodhicitta, that real aspiration correctly, then this needs to be connected with renunciation, this idea that I must definitely emerge. I myself must definitely be freed from samsara.
And when
we speak about definite emergence, this means this idea that if I am not able to emerge from samsara, if I am not able to be liberated from samsara, that is not satisfactory. That is not acceptable. This is a mind of renunciation. And when that mind is extended to others, thinking, it is not, they cannot remain within samsara. They must be separated from suffering. They must achieve liberation. That is a mind of great compassion.
Ngite runi ngendro le tabi taji chiko tabatung runde tone yepe lelembe kono tsilangawa tar sonya jeba nojo tega tege ngize je tsino gawa tar nonago tenje chala jindri som lonje zoodong lo ene yelo ge tsenji kuzo ji sonjai chache ta sura tonje jizu jiso rowa shi gipi.
So then, furthermore, the explicit teachings on the methods for liberation from the lower realms and those on giving up one's own aims and taking responsibility for others are seemingly contradictory on a literal level and lead to doubt. However, even though the explicit wording seems contradictory at first with respect to the meaning, in the manner of cause and effect or of principles and branches of the path, all teachings must act as a support for the other as conditions for a single person to attain enlightenment.
So then,
does that mean that all of the Buddha's teachings have to be accepted literally? This may be a question that comes up for us, right? And the answer to that is no. Not all of them are taken literally or are at face value, because some of the Buddha's teachings are categorized as teachings that require interpretation.
어다 소식 때도 타바토스는 리차 타바테 타듀이 타마이사 손지 수요아레스 레버레스.
So it's true that within the sutras, within the teachings of the Buddha, there are instructions that state that actually strive towards liberation, because liberation is the final goal for practitioners, right? That liberation is the final state that one should seek. There are sutras that state this.
다 대배지로 왔어. 다 대수야데 파쇼 메텔다니 레마도 손지 코로 니네 ತ가로 셀요네 데레베스는 해요.
But if we ask, is that the final intention of the Buddha, that beings strive solely for that state of individual liberation, then we would say, no, this was an instruction that was given at a particular time for a particular a person, for a particular, in a particular circumstance.
다 텔레니 바체가 요게질 다 소식 때도 타바토야데 타듀 마르다스. 타듀 니네데 로제 요조게 때도 다 타바 손지가 공부해야 되레서 다 용조습니다.
So for those students that were of a capacity beyond that person who should strive for liberation, then the Buddha gave a teaching which is more connected with his final intention, which is that one must seek the state of complete liberation, which is full Buddhahood, not only for oneself, but also to be of benefit to others.
다 이나요 돈보테요 고파자지 말에 가로서 돈보테요 할래치는 요한도 그 르마시던 도카로.
But we can't just get to that state of Buddhahood right away or cultivate those practices right away. This is something that we work towards up in stages.
야, 근데 뭐지?
Let's-
로이다. 투마 단조를 리송아. 투마 단조를 로 용완의 주 심메대 좀부터 비체동. 데니 시파 타치 셰페 라바선에 뇨레 샤지노 간다 따쇼. 녀버 라 기피 자와예 바시드 저지.
Okay, so continuing. From the very outset, starting with training the mind with respect to leisure and opportunities, there is no contradiction with practicing the three trainings for the sake of attaining a good future rebirth and bringing an end to rebirth. On the contrary, they are completely related in that they are necessary for practice.
어당가로서 다 니야 로르모모 뭐지 하고 살아와서 거 돈보네 단조니 단종이 중하는 거 주요로 왔어 또 이때
Yeah.
데네 데 강가 용조 어디시 첨벌로 로켓이요 녀레 셰게야 조조레마도 파자야요.
So then this means, right, that like recognizing the this precious human rebirth with its freedoms and richnesses, right? This is something that we still have to keep in mind, even as we move beyond aiming for a good future rebirth and to trying to end rebirth to a state of liberation, right? It's, how to say this? It's like holistic. It fits together. Yeah.
나도 매바조 그 저데 소소게 코아데 하고 살아 매바조 그야 데 매바조 알아 하고 살아 리때 가제 더 템보지면 가니서 더 많아 왔어.
So, but ultimately, we understand that what we need to get rid of is our state of being within samsara, and that on the basis of kind of this body that we occupy now, we won't be able to move fully beyond that state, right?
코아제도 집아 매바조 그때 쪼뇨레데 라바서데레스.
And what is going to help us to eradicate samsara and its cause mainly is the practice of these three higher trainings.
라바서 포게 템보 셰케 뇨레 셰케 때 리자 첨부 또 첨부지면 코셰요 셰토예요 말와스.
Again, right. But if we don't have this body and respect it in a way, then it is going to be very difficult to engage in those three higher trainings. Ludimena de
어제제 그래요 말이야. 다 첸들 가제 제 토토스 제도 너 리지 시와지만 콜리데 노지 템보 그거 알아왔어.
What happens, for most of us is that we, on the basis of this body we have now, we need to engage with these three higher trainings as best we can. And hopefully, if we don't reach realization, then in the next lifetime we'll have a similar body and be able to continue training in those three.
어다 던딜 따와 이나요 단종이 주원이 주때 다 타발은 이렇게 이나요 코파 가디나 그야 되는데 왔어.
And so even for the one who is primarily striving towards moksha or liberation, recognizing the opportunity that a human body affords with those freedoms and richnesses is something that is very useful.
다 거의 다 거와 된간도 다 그게 뒤에 시라고 들어왔어. 어다 때 매바서 그때 다 시라데
So we've said before that samsara is kind of like a poison tree, right? And the axe that is able to cut down the poison tree is like wisdom. The ignorance itself is that poison tree or plant. So we can think of like that axe that cuts it down, or you can think of a sword, right? Like the sword that Mañjuśrī wields above his head. That's a sword representing wisdom. Yeah, but no matter how sharp an axe or a sword that one has, if one does not have a hand and an arm or an arm with which to wield that axe or that sword, one is not going to be able to make use of it. And for this reason, training and concentration is very important. Geshe is racing today. Right. And so similarly, we understand that even if we have like the axe or the sword, and even if we have like a hand or an arm, if that hand or arm is not attached to a strong and healthy body, it is not going to be able to cut down that poisonous tree. So it's a little bit like that. So the hand or the arm represents the training in concentration, and the body represents the training in ethical conduct, in ethics. Right. So then in the friendly letter, Nagarjuna actually, he compares ethics to being like a field. So, when we think about these texts and their examples, this is something that is kind of enlivening, and seeing how each of the trainings, right, through these examples, one depends on the other, depends upon the other, how they all fit together. And through the culmination of the three higher trainings, then we come to a state, right, where we are no longer fearful of the three lower realms, where we are no longer fearful of samsara. We come to a state of fearlessness. And so and so in a way, actually, too, these three the three trainings, not higher, the three trainings in ethics, concentration, and wisdom, these are something that are expressed in certain ways in other religious or spiritual traditions as well, right? Not just in Buddhism. But the understanding and the way of practice is something that is different. So we are going to we're going to leave the Lam Rim there. Geshe is marking where we left off. Sometimes we had an empty weekend, so then sometimes I have to watch the video again to see where we left off. So Geshe is leaving. He said I need to mark it as well.
This one?
So we'll end the discussion of the Lam Rim text there. And so Geshe says now he would like to turn a little bit to Gampopa's jewel ornament of liberation. So just let me put this. So, all of the various kind of religious traditions, they really accept, Lord Milarepa as being like a very highly exalted, enlightened being, whether Kaju, Sakya, Geluk, Nyingma, and so forth. And also it is said that while Milarepa was like the sun, that his disciple, Dapolaje, Gampopa, was like the moon. And that is the author of this text. And remember also the words of Milarepa, Lord Milarepa, very inspiring, that because I have defeated the internal poison, there is no external poison that could possibly harm me.
아니야 바쳐위스
And it is
네 저는 지말라리바가 지말라리바 샤왕가만을 바쳐 발레비 싸서 못
right.
잘라바이나
And he said, do not say that Milarepa was a Buddha from a previous lifetime, was realized from a previous lifetime. Those who say this are lies, right? He went from an ordinary being to realization in one life.
다 대제 원간조 배가 주야 뽑아시 주야 다 할래야겠네 좀 두었어
And that is something that should really make us feel encouraged, make us feel able to bring forth a joyful and unenlivened mind.
어디 디바체 다 저체 알랭가서 지치는 노연은 마시다 저체 덤바
Yeah. Disanat
마솔롱아샤이 지죠
Nyamsulamwarwa. So we are on page 5, the things to train in.
지치는 데 로산을 고다 유주치도 만들어놓으와
Dosane tene di jema drona digide dua nenten duche denden dros nenten duche le tamboa jire denden
요소는 지치세야 너 요스 갈시데
ale di drosasu ngachana
요새 에메가라고 컨트롤 되면 되네
ale so okay ngachana nenden duche drona yagadu di drogime
그래
yeah
어자 다음은
so we're going to do the 10 things to persevere in.
뭐도 저것이 이러버데 어야 다 제와이다 내 때도 샤이 지죠
The 10 things to persevere in.
레 동보이 티솔라 간도 노요는 눈을 지라시 와서 들어서
So Geshe said that Geshe and I were debating over whether it was this section where we left off, because it's actually been months and months since we did this text. So we were debating whether we left off at the 10 things to train in or the 10 things to persevere in. My belief is we've covered the 10 things to train in. But Geshe said maybe someone in the audience will remember. Does anyone remember? I'm pretty confident, but also happy to be wrong. Okay, yeah, so we'll continue.
내 때도 샤이 지죠 어사다
Yes.
다 동보 레 동보이 티솔라 내 때샤
When a beginner persevere in learning and reflection.
다 로조면 다 메아이자 가서 고자야 메아이자 티솔라 레 동보와이네 티소토라고 지고와
So this means for a beginner, because one doesn't have as much of a basis, it's not the time to focus primarily on meditation, that one is mainly going to be learning and reflecting, or hearing and contemplation is how that's usually translated.
뇨뇨시네 고저라 내 때샤
So when experience arises, persevere in meditation training and sadhana practice.
뇨뇨시나세 더트트 때지 도원하고 진도에 되네 된다 내서 여보 하고 자소나 저 건걸 다 쉬자가레스
So what this is saying is that once you do have an experience, then the focus shifts. The focus is going to shift mainly to meditation.
다 티자자 통바르다 얘네 고 비야 소소 내서 하고 사는 고자네 단 여와 만들 기보 메바 스페이스 파시 싱요 말 얘네 잖아 하고 사소나 고자바이나 기보 마요와지 파시 싱요 말했어 얘네 잖아 기보 메바
So what will happen actually too is that once one has that experience arising, then one will be able to remain in meditation, right, without becoming unhappy. It's going to be like a natural thing unfolding.
다 뇨레 간디지나 응고츠 그때는 고 여보 응고츠 주토나 강강 알아서 기보 메바서 내가 놓기 주주래세 알아서 고자야 세지와라 와스 세 강강 알아서 기보 메바서 세요라 와스 대지는 내가 지기 주주래 돼요 와스 내가 지기
So how this happens is that when one is meditating correctly on a wholesome object, that kind of brings that focus into the mind, which is naturally opposing minds that can arise that lead to unhappiness.
그래서 어다 데이터리지요 이자 니까레이나 마셀이나 기보 메바서 텐데스이 말했어
And it is for that reason, because one is meditating and holding that virtuous mind, that these unhappinesses are not going to sort of arise. Yes, no problem. No problem. Annie's having problems with her internet, so she has Taco. Thanks for joining. No worries. Yeah.
Yes.
So then the next one, until you attain stability, persevere in solitude. So what's that saying is that until you get some stability in your meditation, you have to persevere in solitude, right, on your own. Yes. When particularly scattered or agitated, persevere in focusing your awareness. So this is saying that when you have a scattered or agitation, in other words, distraction, the main thing that you actually need is, it's saying persevere. It's saying persevere in focusing your awareness. But the word Geshe is using here is shejin, which means introspection. We need the factor of introspection to oppose those. So introspection is a tricky thing because it's like a spy in the mind that is sort of watching from the background what is happening. But if the introspection factor is too strong, this can actually be a distraction from our object of meditation. So we need to have the introspection present, but not too prominent. So we have to be really skillful with introspection, not overdoing it, but also not neglecting it when it's necessary. We neither want it too weak or too strong. So you know, like many things in life, introspection is all about going the middle way, not underemphasizing and not overemphasizing. Yeah. So if we're too strong with the introspection, the problem is we're so focused on introspection that we're not engaged properly in the meditation, right? If we don't have any introspection at all, it's possible that our mind is completely robbed by distractions and so forth. So a tricky thing to get right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When drowsiness and sloth predominate, persevere in refreshing your awareness. Yep. Yeah. Yep. So Geshe said he's noticed something else here he wants to emphasize. When we talk about the mind being scattered or agitated, it's not just that introspection, but here he's also thinking that maybe focusing awareness is talking about bringing the mind inward. So when we're distracted, what we want to do is bring the mind more inward. But when we have the opposite of that excitement, which here he calls scattered and agitated, which is sinking, here called drowsiness and sloth, what we want to do is actually make the mind vaster. So we want to go kind of more outwards, direct ourselves more outwards to refresh the awareness. Right. So these scattered or agitated mind going towards distraction, this is mainly the result of a predominant affliction of attachment. Those are just. Until your mind is stable, persevere in the composure of the meditation state. Based upon the composure of the meditation state, persevere in the daily activities of post-meditation. Geshe was saying that this seems familiar. I said, yeah, that's why we didn't start in the previous one. Yeah. So what this is saying is it's talking about the composure of the meditation state, persevere in post-meditation. So what Geshe's understanding here is that how we can know if our meditations are going well or not, we can relate to our experiences of body, speech, and mind outside of the meditation session, right? Like in normal life, what's called post-meditation. Yeah. So it's really like helpful too. Like, so for example, if we're developing things like love, compassion, and bodhicitta, for example, when we are in equipoise, that means in the meditation session, the way to really see whether we've achieved a measure of success in those practices is to then go out in the post-meditation session, put ourselves in the vicinity of somebody we find difficult or someone who's made us angry, and then one can gauge one's progress. When adversity abounds, persevere in the 3 types of patience. Yeah, so when there's all kinds of difficulties and obstacles that we're facing, that is the time to train in the types of patience. So a story here related to this is of the great teacher Padampa Sangye, Machi Glabdrin Lama. So for those of you, just to give you maybe some context, Padampa Sangye was the teacher of Machi Glabdrin. And Machi Glabdrin is very famous for teaching the Che practice, right? So yeah, yeah. Los Padampa Sangye. So Padampa Sangye, he liked to practice in challenging places. And one of the places he was practicing, there were many unseen beings there, right? Many different kinds of spirits and unseen beings. And they approached him and they said, if you're going to stay here, you need to feed us. And then Padampa Sangye says, I don't need to feed you because I am one who is beyond the world, right? I have achieved that realization. I am beyond the world, so I don't need to feed you. So a being who is beyond the world does not need to give food to worldly beings, right? So he said, that's why I'm not going to feed you. Yeah, yeah. Ale koje chutu masma ale mi ma ingen din so mare mi ingen din so. So what happened was actually from the influence of those unseen beings, the seen beings, the inhabitants of that area, they said that we don't want this guy staying here, and they sort of protested Padampa Sangye staying, and he was kind of pushed out of that place. And then so then Padampa Sangye, he thought they're actually like quite clever, right, in showing that I am not beyond giving them generosity. So what happened was the next place that he went, when some unseen beings demanded food, he then made them an offering, and then having made that offering, he was able to stay there without being pushed out from his practice. So this story is actually connected to a very important part of our tantric sadhana, which is a torma for the Lord of the sight. Right? This is the reason that we offer a torma to the worldly deity who rules the site where we are. It's connected with that story of Padampa Sangye, for example. Yeah. Right. So these are beings, right, who see themselves as owners of the place where we abide. And we know that, for example, if you're staying in a building or something, you are going to have to pay rent to the landlord to be able to stay in that building. So making the offering of the torma to the Lord of the site was a little bit like paying rent to those unseen beings. Right. Yeah. Like you have to pay tolls when your car goes on certain roads. You have to buy a ticket if you want to ride the train and so forth, right? There are all these kind of relationships where we have to pay a debt. So it's like that. And so this is a reason why you'll see in so many sadhana practices, right, various types of torma offerings, including to those worldly deities of the site. Yes. So we are going to end the lesson here. So I know like we had, and it's always thanks folks for saying you have to leave early. It's appreciated, but not required. You can always leave when you need to. I understand folks are busy this time of year, but also now we're going to end. We're going to do the dedications. After the dedication, if you need to get on with your day, please feel free. But if you'd like to stay for question and answer afterwards, you are most welcome. So thank you. With a mind lifted in a joy, let us dedicate the merit. Changju semjo rinpoche mache banam shechur chi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu bewa shu tongni tawa rinpoche mache banam shechur chi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu bewa shu Jambe bao jitar kyamba tang kundu zambo deyan dejen de da kungi jesu dalo chi gewa de da tamche ratongo dusum shebe gewa tamche gi moha ganga chodu ngapa de dagi gewe tsawa di kun kyan zambo chuchi ratongo wagi Gangri rawe korwe shikang pendan dewa maru chukene chenre ziwan tenzin gyatso yi shape zide badu tengyo. So then all the merits accumulated through myself and others through this, may all realms of samsara be completely cleared of evil thoughts. And in this way, may beings there only bring forth thoughts of loving kindness. In this way, may happiness pervade all worlds. And may I be able to, through these merits, exactly according to my wishes, progress and perfect my study and practice. So we'll pause there and we'll open the floor for questions. So feel free to just put your hand up or a question in the chat.
So I have a question.
Dave, you have a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the use of the word disgust, and in some translations, revulsion to ordinary existence, to samsara, to me that could lead to an exit rather than engagement. You know, I remember Kopan Lama Rinpoche gave the example of you should look at samsaric things like used toilet paper. So that really brought out the image of revulsion or disgust. And so I could see somebody who cultivates that very deeply would find it difficult to, would seek liberation rather than full awakening. So how does one reconcile that revulsion with staying and engaging with the suffering of samsara?
Ngama nganso kandesla gore gewa mepegi keche kaplola roa dene nganso di korwa sikchikyore kyugber lange dabochik like duru jammi tubiagi sik jikuk sabochik tua kyugmer lange dabochik so the debo mepa sik hako gyomar
ale abi geza chepa marwa.
Chepa mare. Like nganso korwa dena kub melang halepe kibo mepa like dukshatsia.
Ninju.
No, menjung mare. Samsara nganso, yeah. Tsumpa gi netsu du. Tsumpa kongso tsunkang tiagi netsu di. Tikakoge mare na chiktak. I just want to get the word discussed for you exactly, Dave, and I'm not remembering it. So if you just give me a second,
Sure.
I want to look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dejin korwa le yi chungwe nyongwa chungse kyang mepar. Yeah, di halepe.
koala shoshi meba koala nimo mondu somba chicho mena seyo.
So it's interesting, Dave. So I was wondering, why is Geshe not realizing what I'm talking about? And now I'm looking at the text, and actually, I just caveat, Sophie's a friend, and I'm sure she has a reason for putting disgust here. But when I'm looking at the Tibetan, it's not that strong, actually. It's not that strong. It's korwale yi chungwe nyongwa chungse. It's like really, you have to really kind of want to get out. Yeah, but it's not discussed from what I see.
Pena tsekono dekichi ina. Tsekono pejawa ina. Tsekono dekichi ota tsekono ale amade kibon diu zalaba ina. Hakuson.
Yeah.
Lugal pejana nagar. Lugal tel kibon diu ta des hale kibon diu za kadina sel soate moyona.
So what's being pointed? Yeah.
So
what? Yeah. So I think Dave, I will get to the second part of your question because I think it's still relevant. But just here, I think maybe discussed is a bit of more of a strong translation than what I would have chosen. And so Geshe is explaining what this section is saying, which is the section is saying that if somebody is in prison, right, and thinks like, actually, like it's pretty great here, like the facilities and things are nice and so forth, then they're never gonna want to bring forth a wish, much less work towards eventually being able to get out of prison. And similarly, right, if one thinks like the country where I'm living right now, like it's fine, I have all the things that I need and so forth, then one is never going to be motivated to emigrate from that country, right? You have to bring forth kind of this attitude that you wish to get out. So what Geshe is saying is that, you know, if we aren't able to develop a real conviction about the faults of samsara, it's really seeing the faults of samsara, then the attitude of wanting to get out is, that's not going to be able to come forth. So Dave, do you want me to ask the second part still?
Which is
about the toilet paper?
No, I guess, yeah, since this text is not speaking of,
but I think you want to know how this fits together with like staying for the sake of sentient beings. Well, that's the crux of the question, right?
Yeah, it's not quite as sharp a contrast anymore, given that explanation, but yeah, still, I think it's still pertinent. Like,
I'm gonna and she may have a reason for doing this. In my first glance at the text, I don't see it, but maybe if I read onwards, I'll see it. So I'll take a careful look at that because she's a very capable person. She must have a reason. But anyways, Then it nganso di inji minji dro gogire duas roa. Then nganso semchin tamche giche du korwala de gogires. Di tets kale kabore duas karinsena di hale peshu chempo yensanga inji minji tungo gire duas then di gel o semshin tangshe giche du inji minji de go gire tets kale kabore duas
mi teto kale kabo mares nipa to ta sona akoso nipa to ta sona se je uzo chet kazele ba ina ko nyola di yama mas
ale kale dunya. What are we doing? So the issue here that Geshe is saying is that when you have achieved all of the power and potential of spiritual practice, then staying in samsara is no longer going to be a problem. It's not being physically present in samsara that's the problem, really. That's important to understand. So Buddhas and bodhisattvas, for example, they exist within various abodes of samsara. We know that, but they don't experience the problems of samsara, right?
tene te ya no jine te se ya shon je se ma papa yin te le jong
Mhm.
a ko sa ras te yong gi ta ko ro me pa yung gi ares.
Yeah, and the Arya Bodhisattva, completely beyond having to experience that suffering, but because of their conviction, they are appearing again and again within samsara to benefit sentient beings.
Ngaro so ta ko la yung me se ya ma ras. So ko yin yo ta de me wa so yi se ya.
So it says samsara, but it's not samsara as in sort of a location, right? But it is the problem of samsara or samsaric suffering that we are trying to get rid of.
하고서
Mhm.
그거도와
Loso.
다 데레 마도 다나 끼워 그거도 나 다진 적이 있으면 다 대단한 여라도 지야레스.
But one place where we could get a problem is I need to be kind of happy and enjoy myself, so I need to be reborn in a pure land. That's an attitude that we should examine, actually.
Yeah.
For someone who's really trying to cultivate the bodhisattva practice, that's a faulty way of thinking, actually. So the real reason to be reborn in Sukhavati, like the land of great bliss or any of the other pure lands, is to think that, like, actually that's my best chance of getting enlightened more quickly. And I don't want beings within samsara to have to wait for my help even like a moment longer than is necessary. So I'm going to go to the Pure Land so I can help them most effectively. That's the kind of way one should be thinking. Yeah, because all of these sentient beings, I've practiced in seeing them as really being close to me, connected to me. Therefore, to leave them in samsara in the state of suffering for like a second longer than they need to, this becomes something unacceptable, right? So look at His Holiness, right? Not only does he say he's going to come back again and again to help sentient beings, but he wants to come to the places where there is the most difficulty, the most need. Yeah, His Holiness doesn't talk about getting reborn in a Pure Land much, does he? Yeah. Did that answer you, Dave?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we kind of got on a riff because of the thing in the text, but anyways, I'm going
to No, that answers the question. It seems to me that part of the answer is is to have an awareness of there is something far better. Exit isn't necessary. It isn't necessary to exit. It's necessary to transform or to see through that, and then you're fine.
So he said, dile yaga chi dusura tapa dundunya gilo chik gogi dusura yene dile yaga chik duas roa perna sangi gopam tobia da wochi ale tapa choki duni. So the interesting thing Geshe is saying is that actually this mind that wishes to achieve Buddhahood also for the sake of others, that's also a mind that strives towards liberation. It's just that we give it as the mind that strives towards supreme liberation, right? But it's also a mind striving towards liberation.
Yeah.
So, when we think about the mind that strives towards liberation, one angle of thinking about it is that there's three different kinds of liberation. There's the liberation of the Shravaka hearers, the Pratyeka Buddha solitary realizers, and there's the final state of liberation, which is complete Buddhahood, which in many scriptures is called the Mahayana liberation, right? So it can be a mind that strives towards any of those three.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think I see Marta. Go ahead, Marta.
Hello, Geshe Ngawang. I have a question about to the dharmas. Yeah. Because, I have like 20 years doing sadhanas, always the dharma is in the sadhana, and I don't know how to make a dharma. So
Yeah.
how can we make a torma or a representation of a torma, and where we can study that?
Yeah. Nganso ngama gendi layul torma pulia ke chembo impe gimsen double out. Then they call drooped up. Yeah. Then they call drooped up mambo jindagi torma, right? Sorry, jindagi torma. Then they call tandami yula. Yeah, yula jinda, right? Yeah, yula, did right. So then drooped up lo mambo nyamlin chegi yoris, yene ko torma dinso pugyo maris, torma yang chogyo maris, then torma kande sogores, dang jangtar dinso kawane jangores, yamena nanso di yula dinso torma pugire mentuas.
네, 다들 아저씨도 다 손이 갈했다 뒤는 갈래 그러was. 하고서 먼저 다는 집어 지지는 거야 말이야. 아니 다 레라고 소리는 또 비스코트다 버더니 어마어마하고서 그래서 제가 요소는 또 알레 딘지가 야레스.
So then Marta Geshe said that actually in the Vajrayana teachings that you're following, we didn't come to all of the sections of the tormas yet, so there'll be more information. But in terms of what you're offering, he thinks that if you offer a biscuit and you bless that with Om Ahum, and you offer this as the torma to the local deities, a biscuit is fine, actually. A biscuit is fine. And then, if you want to kind of offer it more elaborately, you can still use the biscuits, but you can have a more elaborate ritual. But this is going to come later in the Vajrayana teachings. We'll come to an extensive section on the torma. Yeah. Yeah. So, but if we're feeling that we're in a place where there's kind of like these sorts of interferences and things like that, just having like some simple food like a biscuit or a candy, and we recite Om Ahum 3 times, and we imagine that we offer this to the unseen beings, that's a simple way of doing it. That's the easiest way. So you can try that first.
And so a torma is food offering, is like in the Lama Chopa when we offer to the pretas, in the after the 69, that we give a little of our piece.
Oh yeah, that's like there's 2 instances. That's the tsoklak, the remainders of the food. I'll ask Geshe about the difference. Hold on. Nanso perna yula idaki torma pulia roa. Denidi Lama Chopa nganso tsolakti pulia dang daborebes. Yes, so Geshe said it's very similar to the extra tsol that we leave out for the spirits at the Lama Chopa tsol. Yes, very similar.
Thank you so much.
Yes, no problem, Marta. No problem.
So I see Rebecca is unmuted, so she has a question, but we also have 2 from social media.
Okay, well, let's do Rebecca first, and then we've got time to do social media as well. No worries.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you, Rebecca. Yes.
Geshe said the following: our physical body itself causes suffering, and our body is created in relation to karma and affliction. And understanding emptiness allows one to stop fearing karma and afflictions. And this is all connected to wisdom and is a happy result.
Yeah.
What I would like to ask is, I have a lot of friends who are, breaking legs and hips or having a stroke or things like that. It's just sort of part of being older. And they are not becoming happier. They are becoming much more narcissistic and much more angry all the time. And I mean, and they don't want to deal with being in pain. And, I don't know what to say, I guess. I don't know how to help them be relieved of their pain. Some know about Buddhism, some don't. But the response, at least among people that I know and my friends, is to be angry, upset, and to really focus only on oneself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, Rebecca. I just want to make sure that I'm tying the 2 ideas together correctly. So you're mentioning this, that as Geshe is speaking, that the physical body that we have, this is the result of karma and affliction. Therefore, it's the nature of suffering. But with wisdom, we can overcome the karma of affliction, and therefore we eliminate the basis of suffering. But how does that apply to these people who...
How do I give them or be compassionate to them or help them? And what do I say? Because some of them are Buddhists, some of them are not. But it just seems like this general trend where everyone, you know, and you try to talk about whatever it is, and they just say to you, oh, you know, I'm in pain. In other words, I don't know how to be, I can be very compassionate and, you know, care about them and things like that, but I don't know what mental framework to get them into so that they, well, instead of thinking of this as so awful and terrible, just see it as something that they could alleviate and deal with. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes, no, I think
I have all these people, you know, who are having all these things happen to them, and they're very angry, and they get meaner, and they get narcissistic, and I don't know how to help except to go and just be there and take them food and, you know, listen. I don't know how to.
No, I understand, and
their response is always, oh, well, you can't understand, you know, I'm sick, and, you know, you're not. I mean, it's this whole, anyway, that's too long and complicated, but I just don't know.
No, I think I got you. I understand the situation too, Rebecca. I'm almost 45 in a couple months, but like I was, you know, in Buddhism, like since teenager. So like a lot of my friends are boomers and are facing these kind of things. And you see how people who really have a good knowledge of Buddhism, how that really helps them. But yeah, other times people don't have that way of working, can be very frustrating. So I'm going to try to put like the essence in a capsule and ask Geshe and get his feedback for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Nganso di perna nganso lupo di roa ledang nyomong la tene chungares. Dendra yimpa yindu tsane nganso lupa te atene dunge mambo nyongi roas. Dene nganso sherap kena roa. Dene ledang nyomong ne drol tubna. Dene ngaronso kange denso chasama parsha tugire duas di dapochi roa. Rede yine ta mo tropo mambochi lo champo lebne. Lo champo lebdi dene pemugi kange yeres, ruko ki kange yeres, konso sujaya dramandra yeres, roa dene konso sujaya di tes nyurudroya gi chedu roa, ko tap kepa chene ningji la tene korongso tes yapolaya gi rewachik yes. Roa yene di ledang nyumong la tene chunga res labna chichana konso long langire doa, mado jen cheron hakogi omare karinsana dunga di nyoma soan so roa, labia pentuk che tubia gi labia chik yore bes roa di kandes chik lagasa.
Tate dembore lilabotu marwas. Ta ina yo soso kange nyoya tiga. Hakuson. Soso kange nyurdo gweona. Soso kange nyoya tin zomali be kange goche badawo. Zuwa shudawo sono tona. Soso tende tes churdo greta laba ina. Tende petumus.
So Geshe is saying that he's not sure, right? Because each person is different, but maybe one sort of more kind of relatable thing to say to people is that when they are experiencing the suffering, when they are experiencing these pain, these problems, to imagine that they are experiencing them for the sake of people in many worse situations in the world, and to think that through me experiencing this suffering now, may sentient beings in the world be freed from physical and mental pain. If they are able to kind of switch that way of thinking, this could be something that really helps to change their mindset about the pain. So he said he said, of course, every person is different, but that's one thing that he might recommend trying. Because you explained that in this way, you're shifting the focus of who the pain is impacting. You're thinking of those other sentient beings. Geshe said, if you tell them that if you just keep thinking how I'm in pain, I'm experiencing this, by sort of grasping at the self being in pain, all you're going to do is increase the unpleasant experience, the unpleasantness of the experience, actually.
근데 나로서 강가 지바로 왔어. 소소 답 강에 할 레비 강에 첨부된 하고 그러왔어. 근데 소노도나 나로도 강에 때 수주래도 소노도나 근데 다 켜봐진대 이제.
The other thing that could be really skillful to explain to people, and that Geshe has found really helpful personally, is just to have kind of a sense of proportion about what we're experiencing. The world as it is now is so disturbed, is so full of suffering, that if you compare so many other places in the world to what we're experiencing because of old age or whatever, that can just give us a sense of proportion about what we're experiencing. And that sense of proportion can help to decrease the intensity of the suffering. There's no easy way to accomplish it, but if the people are inclined to listen to you, these are a couple of things that you might propose.
Thank you.
So he's saying that, you know, one thing here is that if they believe in past and future lifetimes, this is something that's going to make it much easier to change the way of thinking around this, because you can also think on the individual level. By experiencing this pain and discomfort now, I'm exhausting those accumulated causes, and those future rebirths aren't going to have to experience the same suffering. So one thing that people often ask about is, it can seem that people who are engaged in intensive practice of the Dharma, that they experience more problems, right? That they experience more obstacles. Most of us have probably met somebody like that. So what the holy beings explain is that what you're actually doing is you are ripening many causes of suffering, and they're ripening in this lifetime as something relatively minor than something that would be gaining in momentum and leading to far more serious suffering later. So in some ways, it's actually a good sign in terms of practice. Yeah. And similarly, you know, making it easier to understand in terms of a sense of justice. Like, why might there be somebody right now who's doing terrible things, causing terrible suffering, and it seems like they're getting away with it? But we understand actually that what they're doing is accumulating heavy negative causes that are going to be leading to suffering results later. So this is a common question and doubt that people have. Geshe said it, that, you know, like people ask them about, there's these terrible people that cause all of these problems, and yet it seems like they're perfectly happy and they have a great life. So how is that the case, right? This is a common thing that can arise. So I'm going to take a question, because she's here, from Navoya, and then we'll do the social media after that. Go ahead, Navoya.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you. Did everything get answered?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Something. Self-reflection
Right.
about the pain, physical pain.
Right.
That's how I see it can also help.
Yeah.
But the second part of my question is mental health and addiction.
Right.
How to respond, and because people in that kind of suffering, they are not aware they are even in suffering.
Right. Yeah.
So how to apply or suggest any wisdom,
Yeah.
when someone is on that kind of level,
Right.
being completely unaware.
Could you guys hear Navoya's question, or should I say? Okay, so she was just first she was talking about mentioning pain and reflection on the pain and contemplation as a way of helping that. But then she had a question, and the question is when we're speaking about mental health and addiction. And when we think about mental health and addiction, because of the nature of how those issues are, people might not even necessarily be aware that they're suffering or be aware of kind of in what a bad way they are. So in those types of situations, what would be a good way to help people? Chua dire dua nganso perna sem tang mepa yamena kyaglang shoria ginatsadi perna chema karpo dangden so kyaglang shoria ginatsadi konso sem ginangla nga dungen yongires nga nyok trayes chichena konso hako tugio mare karin sena dinso la tene kandeslagre tang mepa yangmena chema karpo la tene sempet truk jogidua dene konso nyok trayes nyotra hale pitsa chempo chik lebsares konso hako gio mare chichena dene neso din nangla ami dinso pentokchea tap yakshu condensed chikres.
다 때 릴라우 마르와스 다때 다타 아쇼 세나만지 다때도 덤보 코러스 내가 노지 때에 티쇼런도 근데 갈래 다 코러스 떨어를 줘야 돼 뉴로도 다.
Yeah, so Geshe is saying he doesn't think that it's an easy situation. He's not sure what to suggest except that trying to befriend them, trying to, you don't have to oppose their views right away, but if you befriend them slowly, you might be able to point out actually what's happening, where they're suffering and what can be reduced.
야, 소지고 가서 그만 주지요 봤어. 그게 마시는 사고치 마세이나 권지 바시는 가오면에 한도를 손지 되는 라보 지토네. So
Geshe said it reminds him of the story of the Buddha. And remember, there was this man in the forest, and he had this very unpleasant appearance. And so everyone was terrified of him, and no one wanted to get close to him, and he was all by himself. So the Buddha emanated as a being with a similar appearance, and in this way was kind of able to gain his trust and slowly to help him.
This one, go Kale Kange to Konur to Yatate, Tambo Korok, the one which is a Sosolichiona.
Yeah. So you have to build the trust by meeting them where they are. And that's just by trying to fulfill their wishes somehow. And then maybe on the basis of building that trust, then you can show them kind of where things are going wrong.
Oh, that we must say Lele in Bicalatan that. And
then as you build the trust and when their mind is more relaxed, you can point out where the problems are, and you can point out how, these are because of their engaging in these things and how they should reduce their addictions, reduce those tensions. Because especially when you're talking about addiction, if you're just faulting the person and telling them how terrible they are, that's not going to work. It's not going to help them. Yeah, you have to use kind of very skillful methods to engage with people like that. Yeah. So he's not an expert in that one. It's a very tough one, but that's all he can think about that one. Yeah. So Geshe said, it can also be practical things of, like we have medicines for people that are addicted to narcotics or for people that are addicted to alcohol that are similar to alcohol, but not as bad, as like a way of harm reduction. So, things like that maybe can help people. Yeah, maybe that's the way to help those people. Yeah. Dave, I think we had a question on social or?
Yes, a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to the first one.
Okay, let me go find it again. A moment. Yes, okay. First one was from Sonam Roma. How to get rid of nihilistic wrong view? Which are the antidotes?
Sorry, Dave, can you speak up a little? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. How to get rid of nihilistic wrong view? Which are the antidotes?
Nganso cheta pawanorgyo cheta di mebasoe kandes chikres cheta gi nyembo kareres.
Mimeta cheta gi nyembo dongine chena ta shomba ni shonji se kangalolo cheta gi ta nyembo chemo logi.
So in a way, actually, practicing love, compassion, and bodhicitta, these are all natural antidotes to falling into a wrong view of nihilism.
nganzo pena roje me pas tu tumbani sono to kiri chiga kanga yo mare tumbani di chibore sa tawa de shu chembo ching.
So this particular type of wrong view, it comes from somebody thinking that everything is empty, so that nothing exists at all. And then from falling into that, thinking nothing exists at all, you have this wrong view of nihilism, right? That's how it happens.
다 Lama Tsongkhapa chine te pe de cha nuwa chembo chire. Ye ne zul ta senje kanga yo are dewa nyoke dunga nyoke kanga yo are.
Lama Tsongkhapa refutes this view. He says we can't say that there's nothing there at all just because things are empty. And certainly we can see that this isn't the case. There are sentient beings that are here. They experience happiness. They experience suffering and so forth.
roje me pa do ye ne zul yo pa ni jipa ji tu re ma to ko ni pge ji ja ne ji chi le ke yo ma.
Lacking true existence and the relative reality, how things are in relative reality, these are actually two things that have to go together. We can't separate those. It's when we separate them that we come into problems.
ta do as ta tan ji zang ye ne zul yo ba ta wa isa shomba do ni ji chon shi se kang ge ta ko ro ko ge yo ba nye yam ba sa chembo yam ba chu chu ta ge yo isa. So
therefore, Geshe thinks cultivating love, compassion, bodhicitta, which look at our relationships with sentient beings, which form these attitudes of connections, seeing them as precious and so forth. If we're practicing those method practices, that's going to be natural antidotes to falling into a nihilistic view. You know, that there's these sentient beings, there's these Four Noble Truths. All of these are real things. What's not real is their appearance of inherent existence. Really important to be precise. So kind of accepting relative truth as how things are in one respect is a natural antidote to the extreme view of nihilism. Okay. So next one.
Next one.
Yes, the next one is, could Geshe Sonam, this is from Carol, could Geshe Sonam please explain more about Buddha's bodies in comparison to ours, in which, in ways that will encourage the wish to attain these rather than losing the kind of bodies we have now?
Okay, so how can Geshe explain the Buddha's bodies versus the ordinary person's body in a way that is going to make people want to achieve a Buddha's body right now? Is that the question?
Yeah, rather than losing, getting rid of the one we have now.
Rather than getting rid of. Okay, yep. Nganso di korwapa gi lupo dang sange gi ku kepar kora chik labswa sange gi ku dang korwapa gi lupo di kepar condensed chik samlo tangores ane korwagi ludi pajago mares so di masone sangegi ku inji minji togores so chik sone di treje gyabtang condensed chikeres.
Me nanzo tak lil mandawa te le to nyemo koro karsekar Gyatso zone lit le so na koi li cham was le to nyemo lu chuto me ba che akasarwa shamba do tsewa do sha shira dendi ge Gyatso zone ta li le joto so na ani ta sunji ge le Joseph Papi li sena dendi se yo.
So one way to look at it simply is from a causal perspective. So thinking about that the causes of these samsaric bodies, like the one we have now, these are a karma and affliction. So we want to reduce karma and affliction, and we want to cultivate different causes to be able to achieve the body of a Buddha or the body of an Arya Bodhisattva and so forth. So what are the causes that we have to accumulate in order to give rise to those bodies? It's things like love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Those are the causes that will lead to the attainment of those bodies.
Akosarwa tandal nganzo dapo jakete le tenyo korchibo mare nyemu yar ropa ta nyemu to le chuto meba chwaso na so kushi nujires mago para senjel pemba kawado ngati rogi sonse.
The other thing to look at it is when we think about our body, because it is related to karma and affliction causally, we are under the control. Karma and affliction are our rulers. But when we are able, through cultivating the antidotes to defeat the afflictions and the associated karma, then we will be free from being under the control or in servitude to those. Instead, we will be able to go and think and benefit beings exactly as we wish. We're no longer held back. Yeah. So the type of body that is able to do that, able to go wherever, whenever we want to bring most benefit to sentient beings, that is our object of attainment, which is the body of a Buddha or holy being. And if you ask kind of what constructs this body of a Buddha and so forth, what constructs this body of a Buddha is really our training in method and wisdom. And to start constructing this Buddha's body through the practices of method and wisdom, we don't need to be completely free of affliction, because only a Buddha is completely free from affliction, right? We're working towards that state. Even Arya Bodhisattvas have traces of affliction. But we start building this body through accumulating the causes of method and wisdom. Yeah. So like that mantra from the Heart Sutra, Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha Tonglam Lebdirwa. So when we go beyond the paths of accumulation and preparation, once we're on the path of seeing, those afflictions are no longer holding us back. The other interesting thing is that what allows us to get through the path of accumulation and preparation to the path of seeing is only beings of the desire realm. It is said that beings cannot go from and we can achieve it in one life in this desire realm. Beings in the form and the formless realm, they can't progress in that way to the path of seeing. Right. So this also helps us to comprehend really the benefits of that direct realization of emptiness. Yine nanso ku ngene di tabdang sherab chipola tene yongbi omare nanso di kerim dan din sola tene gogirwa. Chetang suku di drubiola. So Dave, did that cover the socials?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I think we shall end here then, and we will see you next week. And stay tuned to our newsletter for the details about Geshe Sherab's teaching and the new Yamantaka course, which will be coming up in September. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a nice Sunday.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoy the hot weather.
Mhm.